All right, Adam, let's talk here a little bit about some golf stuff. We know all of the major sports have put in some sort of gambling laws into theirs. Of course, we joked a little bit earlier when I was saying that when Florida got turned back on, that was for everybody except you out there, Calvin Ridley, who obviously in that two-year window when it was open for a brief moment did some stupid stuff and ended up getting himself suspended for a year from the NFL. It is, we think the major sports when we think about this, right? Like we think about football, and basketball, and hockey, and baseball and stuff. We don't really think about some of these other sports, but there's actually been gambling laws kind of involved in tennis and golf in there for a little bit of a hot minute for sure. And so here we find something getting laid down that made some decent headlines for the way that the PGA went about it.
Yeah, and Matt, I'm really torn on this story. This one is a challenge. I'm going to read out some of the details, and then I want you to talk about this a bit because you obviously know both the golf world and the golf betting world as well as anyone out there. So here are the details of this. We see a suspension come down from the PGA Tour for a player named Jake Stiano, and the important part to know is that he's on the Korn Ferry Tour, which has had a million different names. It is the feeder tour for the PGA Tour, and he was suspended for 3 months for betting on golf. Now, if you just read the headline like that, it reads in such a way that you say, sure, it's a golfer betting on golf. That is a major problem. There weren't a lot of details from the tour itself, but Stiano went on the Any Given Monday podcast, and he laid out essentially what he had done. And look, he said, quote, I understand the principle. I understand you can't bet on golf. They lay it out perfectly. You take this integrity program, so I didn't deny gambling. Here's where it gets tough for me. He made 4 total bets, totaling $116.20. And one of the bets was actually on a PGA Tour event. He made a bet on Bryson DeChambeau to make a birdie on a certain hole at 2021. The other 3 bets that he made were on the match when DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka faced off in 2021. So actually on an exhibition golf betting match Freudian slip, calling it a golf betting match because this is a made-for-TV event that if it weren't for betting probably wouldn't exist in the first place. But that being said, it is
and they were flashing odds on the screen the whole time that was going down, like whatever. Yeah, I mean they were giving you hole by hole, but yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty clear that it's an event that is made for betting, and the reason I really struggle when it comes to golf is because these are independent contractors who are not members of a governing body, right? Like there is no union among PGA Tour players. They are not necessarily members of the PGA Tour. I understand that they often might have inside knowledge, right? That's the part that makes it pretty tricky, where if they're betting on other golfers, they might know someone who knows someone, they might share a coach, they might share an agent, they might share an equipment rep. Like all of these things could exist in which they might have some other form of information. So that part is pretty clear. This is the part that's really challenging for me, though. The 3-month suspension takes him out of Q school. And so it's not really a 3-month suspension, right? If you take a guy out of Q school, and if you don't know what we're talking about, Q school is essentially the tournament where guys have the opportunity to earn their card for next year to be able to play on the big tour. This is really a year-plus suspension because you keep the guy out of Q school. To me, that doesn't really seem in line with what he did, right? And maybe it's just the timing of it all. Maybe they could have allowed him to do Q school and then say, fine, you're going to be suspended for the first 3 months after you get your card and at least give him an opportunity to play down the line on the tour in 2024. But I don't know, man. That's kind of where I fall on this, but I'm really curious what you think about it.
Yeah, it's very tough because these individual sports it's really, really tough because, as you mentioned, it's not the same as it is in the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NHL. So it's the same deal. We've already been through this with the UFC, right? And it's basically the same setup it is in golf. All of these guys, yes, are members of, for in this particular case, the PGA. Same deal with the UFC. Like they have a contract with the UFC, but again, they're not full-time employees. They don't have a union, like you just said. There's nobody making decisions or negotiating on their behalf and trying to figure out what's best for them and getting things laid out specifically, perfectly written out so you know exactly what you're dealing with, et cetera, right? I mean, and the reason we bring this up even from that standpoint is because we saw the NFLPA go to the NFL and and get this stuff written out and explained a whole lot better, because after you and I jumped up and down and screamed into these microphones about the Jameson Williams situation, his suspension gets reduced by 2 games because the NFLPA, on behalf of their players, went in and said, hey, this was stupid. You guys got to fix this. We need everything laid out and spelled out perfectly. We need to know blah, 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 blah. That doesn't happen for UFC fighters. It doesn't happen for PGA Tour players. It doesn't happen for any of that. And so you get weird stuff like this, right? Like you're saying, where exhibition match, is that even really betting? I mean, there's just so many different things in which you could nitpick, and if you don't have things expressly written out and where you know exactly what you can and can't do, then there's a whole lot of gray area, right? Now, individual sports in general, do I think that maybe there should just be a blanket ban that you can't do anything within your sport? Probably, mainly because, not that you'd ever do it, but, it's not like a team sport. Like, yes, these guys have guaranteed salaries, right? I mean, like there is no quarterback in the NFL that would risk his salary to throw a game. Or we've talked about this a million times. Like, the salaries have gotten so big in the major sports that nobody of consequence is ever going to be compromised, because the juice is not worth the squeeze. It just doesn't happen. And so you get in these individual sports where contracts are not guaranteed, and you can make money off of, losing and things and stuff like that, to where it just gets a little really, really murky with me. I would hope that something like this does at least have the PGA to come out with a very firm list of exactly the do's and don'ts and the exact length of penalties for if you do this, if you do this, if you do this twice, then bam, or what, and all this. But, sometimes we say this, that good can come out of the bad. We talked about this with the Bijan Robinson situation a couple of weeks ago with the NFL. Like, sometimes a bad thing can end up into a good situation. I hope that happens here for golfers.
Just as an aside about the Bijan Robinson situation, turns out the one we need to suspend is Arthur Smith. Right?
Yes.
It turns out it's the head coach who was really – in the span of like 2 weeks, we've gone from yelling about the injury report in the NFL to yelling about the coach who won't use his player in the first place. It's like, maybe there's nothing nefarious. It's just that his coach is an idiot.
Yes.
No, but when
this is true.
To the golf point, and to the point about Jake Stiano and betting on the sport, I think where I'm landing on this is a Jameson Williams feeling that, yes, I understand that there has to be a penalty and that you cannot do this, and we need to make clear that you cannot do this, but I don't think this punishment fits the crime at all. I don't think keeping the guy from having an opportunity to play golf on the PGA Tour next year is commensurate with $116 of bets, 3 of which were on an exhibition match that is made for betting in the first place. And if we're really being honest with ourselves about what golf is and the origins of golf going back the longest of times, golf is a betting sport. It might be the original betting sport. It is the sport where when you go play with your friends, it often involves betting when you're just out there saying, yeah, we're going to play a buck a hole, right? We're going to play a Nassau, right? Yeah. Hey, closest to the pin buys, is getting beer bought for him. Like, whatever it is something that is inherent in the sport in such a way that it requires the PGA Tour to have more transparency. And I get it. You probably are listening to this podcast thinking, these guys always yell about transparency. Yeah, because it's the best way to make the regulated market more open and accessible to people, and to give them more confidence in the way things are being done and the way either penalties are being meted out or guys are being deterred from doing things that they shouldn't do.
And Adam, I understand this is an incredibly slippery slope as well, but I think you understanding the nuance of the betting market and being an actual bettor the way that you do, I think you will understand this maybe than some of the people out there who are going to say, oh, you're just trying to be an apologist for some of these guys or whatever. But I honestly think how much is getting wagered should play into these decisions as well. And I know I understand it's a slippery slope and whatever, but like, ain't nobody getting rich off a $25 bet, and nobody's like throwing anything, or you're not compromising the integrity of anything, and all there's off of a $25 bet, off a $50 bet. Hell, man, off of a $1,000 bet. I mean, it's just the case that it is. Like, I know slippery slope, and it's all kinds of craziness when it comes to all that, but at the end of the day, if the reason we're doing this is from an integrity standpoint, which is why we're doing it, again, like that has to factor in, because $50 is not compromising the integrity of anything. Like $100 is not compromising the integrity of anything. wrong is wrong is wrong, and there should be some sort of penalty. I'm not saying that you will get to walk scot-free, but I do think at least needs to be taken into consideration that you were not, that it is quite obvious, right, that you were not doing anything that was going to compromise the integrity of whatever event it was that was going on.
So it brings to mind a story that my mom always tells me from when she was growing up, how my grandfather basically said to her, when it came to smoking, drinking, like whatever the vice was, he said, if you're going to try this, you're going to try this in my house. You're going to try it with me right here, right? Like when, if you're thinking about going out and doing this with your friends or in a place that you shouldn't be, no, you want to try a cigarette? Okay, well, when you're of the appropriate age, you try it right here, right? And the idea to me in that is that when you talk about the transparency that could be involved here, let's just say, I'm going to throw a number out, $25, $50, $100. Let's say the PGA Tour put in a policy to say you can place legal wagers at a regulated sports book up to X amount. Any sport, whatever the sport might be. And we made it clear. You could actually, if you were the type of person who really wanted to be an apologist, you could make a case that this would build engagement. You could make a case that people would be more interested in watching in a tournament if they knew that, someone, a playing partner of someone was saying, oh yeah, I bet you $25 can't make that one. Right? Like it would almost be a way to engage. I get it. The slope is probably way too slippery for that to ever happen, and the nuance is probably too difficult for the tour to want to parse out, because a lot of stories might just say, this guy bet on golf, not this guy bet $20 on golf. But I think you and I are making the point here to say that if the idea is going to be recreational betting, then that's a lot different than why we don't want people to be able to bet on their own sport, which is that they might use inside information. They might influence a wager. And I guess that's the hard part here as I talk this through, is that if you did allow recreational wagering, you say you allow $25 bets on someone, well, that's not the only money being wagered on that person, right? Like someone might have a far more serious wager on that person, and maybe, a friend of a friend would just think they were screwing around to miss a putt to, mess with somebody's bet. So I don't know, man. I just feel like as we talk through all of this, well, we don't think we have solutions necessarily, but we do feel like that there are better ways than what happened here.
Yeah, I just there's a way to get it. There's a way to get it done, and like you said, I mean, I understand that we're far away from this, but if you're the PGA and you have an official sports betting partner, and everyone is allowed to bet with that official sports betting partner, and your account is officially monitored by this official sports betting partner, and by the way, they can put limits on accounts just like they do with anybody else out there. And it's like, hey, the account's limited to $100 bets. You cannot bet anything more than $100 on anything within the account and all that. I mean, again, we're just talking through this on the fly here, but there are ways that this can be done that doesn't compromise the integrity whatsoever. Specifically, because when you're talking about golf, Adam, like you're talking about like you get paid like when someone succeeds, right? Like, I mean, that's how you get paid, right? And like, you're going to say, well, what about a head to head? It's $100 head to head. Like, no golfer is throwing, no golfer is not making a putt because someone's got $100 on it. Like that's not how it works, right? And if you know how head to heads work, then yeah, you can't make money off of $100 head to head. It's just, there are ways that this could be done and handled a little bit better, but certainly in this scenario, I'm with you. I hope a Jameson Williams situation does happen here where they go back and look at this and say, is this really worth kind of like making this guy sit on the sidelines for over a year, especially when we consider, one, it's the minor leagues anyway, so not making very much money to begin with, and then you're basically taking away for that person to put food on the table for an entire year. So hopefully we can get some cooler heads to prevail there on that one. Guys, as always, Apple, Spotify, Google, every single place that you go out and get your podcasts, we are on there. So please hit the subscribe button. It is absolutely free with everything that we do. LegalSportsReport.com for all of these stories in depth with all the great stuff that Adam and company are doing over there as well. If you want to follow Adam on the Twitter machine, @AdamCandee, 2 E's, no Y. For Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.